Asia has become the world's largest waste dump, particularly for plastics. However, more Southeast Asian nations are now joining China and pushing back against the handful of wealthier countries who are sending them here. Though importing waste was once a lucrative business for poorer countries, they've become overwhelmed by the sheer volume of waste. China, which for years had imported nearly half of the world's plastic waste, started the trend in late 2017 when it banned imports of plastics and mixed paper, while Thailand, Malaysia and Vietnam have now passed laws to ban it. The practice continues and anger is rising. Earlier this month, the president of the Philippines even threatened to sever ties with Canada unless it takes back over 1,000 tons of waste. So growing concerns there are over the waste environmental impact have recently prompted an international gathering to vote for restricting such trade. What can be done with these mountains of waste, and how exactly will the international community curb this problem? Joining me here in the studio are Ms. Wu Changhua, CEO of Beijing Future Innovation Center, and Thomas Patrick Gale, who is chairman of the Environmental Health and Safety Group at the law firm of Lehman, Lee and Xu. Welcome to both of you. To the point. Now, let's just take a look at what China has done, what China has achieved over the past 2 years or so. As I said, China had this ban, which was put into place later half of 2017, and before that, China was importing a cumulative 45% of the world's plastic waste since 1992, and that's according to this institution called Advanced Science. I don't know exactly what that institution is. My research team needs to do a better job today. Next time. Now, in 2016 alone, about half of all plastic waste intended for recycling, that's about 7 million, was exported to China. So more than 1 year since China adopted the ban. Ms. Wu, what has been achieved?
To correct a little bit, actually, it's less than a year. Just started officially actually 2018.
Again, my research team not up to par.
It's okay. It's okay. So it's still relatively new, very refreshed. Sure. The outcome, I think, has been very impressive, very encouraging. As you mentioned, back in 2015, China imported half of the world's plastic waste. But if you like today, we literally banned, we stopped, right? Mm-hmm. And how to prove that? I think the ripple effect can be seen or witnessed by a few facts. One, the speed of legislative process in developed countries, if you like EU countries, Australia, Japan and others. Secondly, largely...
What are they doing?
They are also rolling up very accelerating regulation to ban and to transform, set a timeline actually to shift it to recyclable plastic, like straws, bags and others. I think second reflection is the speed of efforts by leading brands, global companies, including the U.S. Even though at the U.S. federal level, U.S. is not a party to the Basel Convention, but if you look at the market players, actually, they're very actively pursuing setting goals.
See, you have to make a difference there. Let me go to Southeast Asian countries, because I think that is where a big chunk of the problem is for now. Yeah. Since last year, Southeast Asian countries, including Thailand, Malaysia and Vietnam, all introduced legislation to prevent foreign waste from pouring into their country. Thomas, how big is the problem for them, to your knowledge?
Well, first I'd like to compliment you on your performance on Fox. I thought that was a wonderful tribute to the company and to yourself. So
thank you
I applaud you on that. But on the question on the waste, first I'd like to clarify, I don't characterize it as a ban. I characterize it as purifying the waste stream so they can be recycled in the proper way. And China's been very good at doing that, and I applaud them for doing that in all the countries, because it is their obligation to protect their citizens from other people's environmental contamination. Mm-hmm. It's the companies themselves that are trying to exploit some of the loopholes to illegally dispose of their materials. China still allows plastics into the country that meet the guidelines that they have set, and those are very good, very stringent guidelines. Malaysia, the other countries are following suit on that, as again they should. Material that comes in illegally is illegal, period. So it should not come in. I believe, as a lawyer, I believe in the rule of law and the right of each country to establish their own sovereign domination over it. So they should be able to protect what comes in.
As I mentioned, the President of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, earlier in May threatened to sever diplomatic ties with Canada because of for not agreeing to take back 69 containers containing these toxic waste. Exactly what is the problem here? I mean, the companies obviously are the Canadian companies exporting at fault here, or was it the company importing or smuggling in these things into Philippines the problem here, or was it the Canadian government's problem? Ms. Wu.
Sure. I think that there's a big issue here. So when they export, or when the Philippines import the waste, what's written on paper is quite different from what's the content actually in the garbage, in those containers actually. It turns out to be hazardous waste, plastics, whatever. The Philippines don't want to take that anymore, and so this is sort of a legacy issue, because this shipment actually happened in 2013 and 2014, but now the Philippines, the government asked Canada to take that back, but somehow, at this moment it's still not solved yet. That's how the things actually triggered
the diplomatic route, yeah. But is that the same problem as we're talking about, Thomas? I mean, we're talking about countries setting up regulations to ban these imports, but then this is a historical problem, Thomas.
I think there are two different things. Going forward, there are new standards that are being set. So new bars that companies have to comply with. Remember, this isn't country to country. This isn't the United States versus China versus Indonesia. This is a company that is acting illegally and sending the material to save them some money to do illegal disposal. So it's an excellent thing that they are correcting it. The historical thing is a little more difficult because you don't know what the contract said. You don't know if there's indemnification in there by the company who was accepting the waste. You don't know if there was a obligation for the receiving company to do inspection upon arrival and then accept it. So you have a variety of issues that come on. At the end of the day, it seems like the moral thing to do is for them to take it back so that they can do it, regardless of the legalities that may be involved on the minutiae.
Maybe even just as kind of a gesture. Or
plus, for 69 containers, it costs about $2,100 a container to ship back to Canada.
But again,
so it shouldn't be, oppressive.
Yeah, sorry to have interrupted you. But again, I think it's an interesting point to make the separation between the industries, the companies, and the government, because sometimes, and I think that's one of...
There is a role. The government does have a role to play. Because,
what is it?
Because the government, the Canadian government is also signatory to the Basel Convention, right? So from the regulator's perspective, they should have enforced the laws, regulations very restrictively, but still, Canadian company is still doing that. So there is a certain sort of lapse, actually, on the regulator, on the government side there as well.
Would you say that these companies that shifted the things out of their country, would you say that they broke the Canadian law, or they broke any international convention? Then they should be held accountable.
Absolutely.
By the Canadian government, maybe.
Absolutely. That's why where the argument is centered around. That's why the Philippine president has a big point to make here. He's very strong-handed. Basically, I have the reason, I have the the legal background, whatever. You have to take this back.
See, there's the question: how much is a country bound for the action, or responsible or accountable for the action of individual companies in that country, and how realistic is it? I mean, for a country of Canada, okay, the population is still relatively small, but for a country like China, for instance, if the government would be held accountable for all of these things that the individuals or entities are doing, I think the government will have no time left to do anything else, Thomas.
Right. Well, and I think the countries can't be held responsible.
I'm not trying to defend the government. I'm just talking about a practical situation here.
I think, though, that the laws of that particular country, the United States, Canada, etc., were also broken, because there were manifests that went out that made an official statement as to what was in those containers, and that was fraudulent. So that's an illegal activity within that particular generation country. So now you have the receiving country who have their own laws on it, so now their laws are being broken as well. So there is really no reason for that. Companies have a corporate social responsibility obligation to act responsibly and take care of their things properly.
So earlier this month, the in Geneva, Switzerland, more than 180 countries agreed to amend this Basel Convention. By the way, we haven't explained this convention. It's a treaty to regulate the international movement of hazardous materials. And the amendment says that exporters must obtain consent from the governments of receiving nations before shipping in those most contaminated, mixed and unrecyclable plastic waste. So before these ships go into the Philippines, for instance, knock, 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 the door has to open. How much of a difference is that going to make?
It's going to be important. Let's assume if this particular article actually were in existence back then, before the Canadian company shipped everything actually to the Philippines, they should have informed the Philippine side and say, you know, I'm going to ship this and what's going to be in it, right? And
but let me just interrupt you here because I have really limited time. What's going to happen to the waste then if the countries are not allowed to export them, if the countries are not allowed to go in? Where do they go?
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
So you just have to eliminate them.
The wonderful thing about this is it pushes towards going back to the beginning of the process and remanufacturing. You have to make materials that can be recyclable. You have to have purified waste streams. You have to manufacture for disassembly so you can take things apart and effectively create streams of waste that you can use beneficially. And that will force this. And then on the backside, to be able to go in and do the sorting in a more competent manner so you get very pure waste streams that can be recycled. So I think that's one of the very important things that comes out of all this. It'll drive very high environmental performance for the future.
Yeah, well, the United States, I'm going to talk about it because it is only one of the two countries, it is one of the only two countries, I should say, that have not ratified the Basel this convention. The next one, the other one is Haiti.
I believe actually they have ratified the original convention. I don't believe they ratified the amendment. The original convention goes back to 1995.
My information is that the United States is
I was just on their website earlier today, and the United States is listed as
maybe we should double check this. Do you have any better understanding on this?
And my understanding is that it's not officially a signatory. Actually, U.S. is not.
Like
okay, let's check that.
I was on their website an hour ago.
Yeah, okay, sure. Generally speaking, U.S. has been intentionally staying out of many international environmental conventions. So that's not surprising.
Only recently. I mean, the United States was the leader through the Rio Convention.
To sign is one thing, but to ratify is another.
Yes,
if it doesn't ratify, it means it's not
legally not bounded.
Well, it's the ratification of the amendment, I believe, not the original compact.
Because the amendment only happened earlier this month.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it can't possibly be that the U.S. But why?
Well, again,
10 seconds, please.
I think that the convention really doesn't matter that much because there are already laws that deal with it. It's already illegal for people to fraudulently fill out their manifest.
Okay.
So you really have another law on top of a law that does the exact same thing. So illegal is illegal. If they abide by the law, then there's no reason for the convention.
We have to wrap it there. Many thanks to Wu Changhua and Thomas Patrick Gale.